My name is Jacob Williams. I'm 38 years old, a husband, a father of two, and until recently, a man who thought he had it all. We lived in Denver, Colorado, in a house most people could only dream of, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and a backyard big enough to host extravagant parties. I had built a successful real estate business from the ground up, and my wife, Emily, had never wanted for anything. We had been married for just over 5 years. Our children, Noah, 4, and Olivia, 2, were my whole world. I worked hard to give them the best life possible, to make sure Emily never had to worry about a thing. I thought we were happy. I thought I was happy. But happiness built on a lie is doomed to collapse. It started with small things. Emily became distant, her smiles didn't reach her eyes, her laughter felt forced. She started taking long phone calls in the other room, lowering her voice when I walked by. She would say she was visiting a friend but never mention names. I told myself it was nothing. Marriage wasn't always perfect, right? Maybe she just needed space. Then came the nights she didn't come home. The first time, she claimed she had too much wine at dinner and stayed at a friend's house. The second time, she said she had fallen asleep in her car after a late-night drive to clear her head. The excuses were weak, but I forced myself to believe them because the alternative was unthinkable. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how deep you try to bury it. One night, I came home earlier than usual. I had a last-minute meeting cancelled, so instead of heading back to the office, I decided to surprise Emily with dinner. I picked up her favorite sushi and walked through the front door, expecting to find her with the kids. Instead, the house was silent. I frowned, checking my watch. It was only 7 p.m., too early for her to have put Olivia and Noah to bed. I walked upstairs and heard muffled voices from our bedroom. My heart started pounding. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I already knew. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. I pushed the door open. And there they were. Emily. And my father. I froze. The sushi bag slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Emily gasped, yanking the sheets up around her, but it was too late. The image was burned into my mind forever. My father, my own father, scrambled to grab his clothes, his face pale. Jacob, I didn't let him finish. I turned on my heel and walked out. My whole body felt numb, like I was moving through water. Emily ran after me, calling my name, but I didn't stop. I walked straight out of the house, into my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away before the weight of what I had just seen crushed me completely. And that was the night my world ended. I don't remember much of that drive. The streetlights blurred together, my hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my chest, but my mind was blank. Empty. Eventually, I pulled into a hotel parking lot. I don't even know why I chose that place, maybe because it was far enough from home, from them. I booked a room, ignored the curious look from the receptionist, and locked myself inside. Then, I broke. I punched the wall so hard my hand throbbed, but I didn't care. The pain in my fist was nothing compared to what I felt inside. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had just been ripped apart. Emily. My wife. The mother of my children. And my father. The man who raised me. The man I looked up to. Together. There wasn't a word strong enough to describe the betrayal. It wasn't just an affair, it was something much worse. It was a knife plunged into my back by the two people I trusted most. I wanted answers. I wanted to know how long this had been going on, if my entire marriage had been a lie. But at the same time, I didn't want to hear a single word from either of them. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I finally grabbed it and looked. Missed calls, Emily, 12, Dad, 8, texts from Emily, Jacob, please come home. We need to talk. I can explain. Please, for the kids. Don't just leave like this. The kids. That thought hit me harder than anything else. Noah and Olivia were still in that house, completely unaware that their family had just been destroyed. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. I couldn't just disappear. No matter how much I wanted to drive away and never look back, I had 2 children who needed me. 2 children who deserved better than to grow up in the middle of this disaster. I didn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't let me. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight. The next afternoon, I drove back home. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, but my mind was clear. I walked through the door, and there she was. Emily stood in the living room, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. The moment she saw me, she took a step forward. Jacob, please, don't, I said, my voice cold and unfamiliar. Don't say a word. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. I walked past her and straight to the playroom. Noah was stacking blocks, Olivia holding a stuffed bunny in her tiny hands. The moment they saw me, they lit up. Daddy! Noah grinned, running toward me. I picked him up, holding him tight. For them, nothing had changed. But everything had. I turned back to Emily. We're telling them nothing for now. They're too young. But we are done, Emily. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Jacob, please don't do this. I made a mistake, I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This? I gestured wildly. This is something else entirely. She covered her face, sobbing. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. I'm filing for divorce, I said firmly. And I'm getting custody. Her head snapped up. What? No, Jacob, you can't just. I can. And I will. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, had destroyed everything. And I was about to make sure she didn't get to walk away unscathed. The fight was just beginning. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. His name was Mark Reynolds, one of the best family attorneys in Denver. I didn't want to waste any time. I wanted this marriage dissolved as quickly as possible, and more than anything, I wanted full custody of my kids. Mark leaned forward, listening carefully as I told him everything. His face remained unreadable, but when I finished, he exhaled sharply. Jacob, he said, choosing his words carefully. This is one of the worst betrayals I've ever heard. But we need to be smart about this. Your wife committed adultery, yes, but that alone won't guarantee you full custody. My stomach twisted. Why the hell not? Courts prioritize the children's well-being. Emily is their mother, and unless we can prove she's unfit, she'll fight for shared custody. If we come out too aggressively, she might accuse you of being unstable. I clenched my fists. So what do we do? We build a case, Mark said. We gather evidence of her affair, prove that her actions could negatively impact the kids, and most importantly, we stay calm. No emotional outbursts, no impulsive decisions. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I nodded, but my mind was already racing. Staying calm. That was going to be impossible. Facing my father before I could even begin the divorce process, there was one more confrontation I had to face. My father. I hadn't spoken to him since that night. He had sent texts, long, rambling messages about how sorry he was, how he never meant to hurt me. I ignored them all. But deep down, I knew I needed to face him. So, a few days later, I drove to my parents' house. My mother had passed away years ago, so he lived alone now, something I once felt sorry for. Now, I wished he was alone, completely abandoned, just like he had left me. When he opened the door and saw me, his face paled. "Jacob." "Don't," I snapped, stepping inside. "You don't get to talk first." He swallowed hard, stepping back as I walked past him into the living room. The house smelled the same, old leather and cigars. I used to love visiting. Now, I could barely stand being there. I turned to face him. "How long?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "Son. How long?" My voice was ice. He hesitated, then finally muttered, "A year. A year. 12 months of lies. Of sneaking behind my back. Of pretending to be my father while sleeping with my wife." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest picture frame, a family photo from my wedding, and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered, pieces raining down like the broken trust between us. "You're my father." My voice shook with rage. "You were supposed to protect this family, not destroy it." He flinched but didn't argue. He just stood there, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "I can't undo it," he said quietly. "I wish I could. I hate myself for this, Jacob." I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "No, you don't. If you did, you never would have done it in the first place." Silence. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. "You're dead to me. I don't want to see you. I don't want you near my kids. And if you ever try to contact me again, I swear I'll make sure you regret it." His eyes filled with something, shame, regret, maybe even grief. But I didn't care. He had made his choice. I walked out and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Emily was served with divorce papers. She had been staying at her sister's house, avoiding me. When she received them, she called me immediately. "Jacob, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Let's talk." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. "Talk? Like you talked to my father every time I left for work." Silence. Then, a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Well, congratulations, Emily. You did." And with that, I hung up. This wasn't just a divorce. This was war. The divorce process was ugly from the start. Emily wasn't just fighting for shared custody, she was trying to make me look like the problem. Her lawyer argued that I was too emotionally unstable to be a full-time parent. They brought up my sudden departure after discovering the affair, twisting it to make it seem like I had abandoned my kids. They even tried to use my confrontation with my father against me, claiming my violent outburst made me a risk. It was disgusting. Mark, my lawyer, kept me grounded. "They're going to throw everything they can at you," he warned. "But we have the truth on our side. Stay calm. Be patient." I followed his advice, but it wasn't easy. When the first custody hearing arrived, I walked into that courtroom feeling like I was stepping onto a battlefield. Emily sat across from me, dressed in soft pastels, playing the role of the heartbroken mother. Her lawyer painted me as a distant father who had thrown a tantrum and left his family behind. Then it was our turn. Mark stood and presented the facts, real facts. Emily had cheated for over a year, disrupting our home and lying to me and our children. She had engaged in an affair with my father, a man who would inevitably remain in her life if she had custody. I had always been a present and responsible father, providing for my kids financially and emotionally. Then Mark dropped the final bombshell, testimony from our nanny, Sophia. Sophia had been with us for years, practically part of the family. She took the stand and revealed what she had seen, the late nights Emily spent away, the strange men she met in secret long before I had even suspected the affair. "That's right. My father wasn't the only man. Emily's face drained of color. Her lawyer scrambled, objecting, but the damage was done. When the hearing ended, the judge ordered a full custody evaluation. It wasn't a victory, yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Emily stormed out without looking at me. Good. She didn't deserve to. The custody battle dragged on for months. Every meeting, every court appearance felt like a war zone. Emily wasn't backing down, but neither was I. Then, one night, she showed up at my house unannounced. It was late, past 10 p.m. I had just put Olivia to sleep and was reading Noah a bedtime story when I heard the doorbell. When I opened it, there she was. She looked different, tired, thinner, like the weight of her own choices was finally catching up to her. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I crossed my arms. "There's nothing left to say, Emily." She shook her head. "Please. Just 5 minutes." I let her in, but only because I wanted to hear what desperate excuse she had now. She sat on the couch, staring at the floor. "I know I messed up," she started. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm losing everything, Jacob." I stayed silent. "I can't do this anymore," she admitted, her voice breaking. "The court battles, the lawyers, the humiliation. My own family won't even look at me." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm tired, Jacob. I just want to fix this, for the kids." I let out a slow breath. "You can't fix this, Emily. What's done is done." A long silence stretched between us. Then, she whispered, "Would you ever be able to forgive me?" I stared at her. The woman I had loved. The woman I had built a life with. The mother of my children. I thought about everything she had done. The betrayal. The humiliation. The pain. Then I spoke the truth. "No," she closed her eyes, nodding as if she already knew the answer. And with that, she stood up and walked out the door. 2 weeks later, the final custody hearing arrived. I walked into that courtroom with my head high, knowing I had done everything I could. And when the judge finally spoke, delivering the verdict, my heart nearly stopped. I won. Full custody of Noah and Olivia. Emily would get supervised visitation. She burst into tears, but I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Just exhaustion. The battle was finally over. I had lost my wife. I had lost my father. But I had won the only thing that mattered, my children. Winning custody of my children should have felt like a victory. And in some ways, it was. But as I sat alone in my house that night, after putting Noah and Olivia to bed, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt empty. The battle was over, but the scars remained. Emily was out of my life, but she wasn't gone. She would always be the mother of my children, a presence I couldn't fully erase. And my father? He had tried to reach out a few more times, but I ignored him. As far as I was concerned, he no longer existed. The first few weeks as a single father were the hardest. There were nights when Olivia would wake up crying for her mom, and I had to comfort her, telling her that everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would be. Noah asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Why doesn't mommy live here anymore? Do you still love her? Will she come back?" I always told them the same thing, "Mommy and Daddy love you very much. We just can't be together anymore." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. Emily saw the kids twice a month during supervised visits. The first time she saw them, she looked like a ghost of the woman she once was. She had lost weight, her eyes tired, her smile forced. I expected to feel anger. Hatred. But instead, I felt nothing at all. That was the moment I realized I had truly moved on. Months passed, and life slowly began to rebuild itself. I focused on work. I focused on my kids. I started going to therapy, something I never thought I'd do. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel like me again. People told me I should start dating, but I wasn't ready. Maybe one day, but not yet. Right now, my priority was being the best father I could be. One evening, as I was tucking Noah into bed, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Are we gonna be okay, Daddy?" I smiled, stroking his hair. "Yeah, buddy," I said softly. "We're gonna be just fine." And for the first time since my world fell apart, I actually believed it.